Hey, what is going on, guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video we're going to be starting season 10 off with a complete tier list for every single role for patch 10.1. I'm going to do my best to remember to add timestamps down below as well, so if you do want to skip ahead to a certain role, you can do that. But with that being said, guys, let's get started. So if we start things off up in the top lane for the S tier, Mordekaiser did end up getting a nerf to start season 10 off here. It was a nerf to his passive duration, also to his passive movement speed, so that does bring him down a little bit, but it doesn't drop him out of S tier in my opinion. He's now just going to be on the same level as the other S tier champions. So in previous patches, Mordekaiser was like probably even like S plus OP tier. In this patch now, I just think he does drop down like into S tier, even level with all the other S tier champions. So if you are looking for a good split push 80 bruiser right now, Jax, Darius, Kled, all very strong for the current meta. If you're looking for a tank in the top lane, either Ornn or Malphite are going to be your best options. I do think that Ornn is a little bit stronger than Malphite though, so I would prioritize him a little bit more. So for some of the A tier picks there, I'm not going to touch on every single one of them, but I think Quinn, Cassiopeia, Heimerdinger, really good picks right now into those S tier champions. They do require a lot more skill to play though, and they're more so feast or famine champions, so if you really know what you're doing on the picks, you can take over games on them. But if you fall behind early, if you don't really know how to play them, then they're not going to be as useful and as reliant as something like an Ornn or a Mordekaiser or Malphite. Like even if you fall behind on those picks in the early game, you can still be pretty useful once you do reach the mid game. I think a few of the tank picks there are really flying under the radar in the A tier, especially the Maokai, the Shen, along with the Mundo there. Maokai got buffed a couple patches ago. He's been really underrated ever since he's got those buffs. The Shen pick there is great for the current meta. His ultimate is just so strong for being able to instantly get to a dragon fight, help bot lane, secure early dragons, get to your Dragon Soul win condition. So I think Shen's a great top laner right now. And the Mundo pick, he can be a really good pick into the Ornn, into the Mordekaiser once you get like your Spirit Visage, once you get your MR items. Like if there's a full AP enemy team comp, say they have like a Mordekaiser top lane, like a Kassadin mid lane, if they have like an AP jungler as well, then Mundo can be actually a pretty sleeper OP pick up in the top lane for 10.1. And then for the B tier picks, these are going to be the average top laners. So in my mind, in order for you to make these champions more worth playing than an S tier or an A tier pick, you really need to know what you're doing on the picks. I just think that if you play these champions at an average level, then there's no point in really playing them over an A tier or an S tier champion. So I'd only really be playing these picks in this patch if you main them or if you are a one trick. And then for C tier picks, I would just do my best to stay away from these champions in this patch. Like if you do want to play them, I would really only play them if you're a one trick on these champions. Like any less than that, if you're not just spamming these champions, they're just really not going to be worth picking up because they're just a lot weaker overall than the champions above them on the tier list. So if we move on to the jungle now, what's going to be dominating for the start at 10.1 is any jungler who can skirmish well in the early game, who can make an impact by ganking well in the early game, and who can control dragons very early on as well. So early to mid game, junglers are going to be usually your best to start off here for 10.1. So that's why we do see Nunu, Shaco, Warwick, Echo, Olaf, and Elise all in the S tier. Every single one of these champions does have good skirmish potential in the early game. They do have good objective control in the early game. I guess I'd say other than Echo, like Echo's just so strong right now. His mid game spike is so good that even though his first couple levels, his early skirmish isn't the best compared to something like an Olaf or like an Elise, I just think because his mid game is so strong, he still does remain an S tier pick. And then for the A tier picks there, I think a couple underrated notable picks. Xin Zhao right now not being played very much at all, but I do think he's great because he does have really good skirmish potential in the early game, really good 1v1. He's super simple to play. If you get ahead on the pick, you're not really going to mess up on Xin Zhao because once you get items, your damage is going to stick. You don't have any skill shots really other than your W's, so you're going to be able to take over games on this champion if you do get ahead. I think Zac is also really underrated right now, probably other than Nunu. Other than Nunu, I'd say he is the best tank jungler you can play right now for patch 10.1. So if you're looking to add a tank to your pool for the start of season 10, I would be looking to pick up Zac. So for the B tier champions there, those are going to be picks that I just don't think are great right now for the current meta, or they're just average champions because a lot of them either don't have the best skirmish in the early game, they don't have the best early clears, or they just can't gank very well for the first couple levels. So somebody like Nidalee and Talia, I think that they're okay picks if you can play them at a high level and if you really know what you're doing on the picks, but they're just, because they require way more skill in order for you to make them work at that level, I just don't think they're more worth picking up than something like an A tier or an S tier champion. For things like a Mumu, Shyvana, and Evelynn right now, very weak early game skirmish for the most part, more so like farming junglers to level 6. You don't really have the best gank potential in the early game with them either, so I just don't think they're very good for the current meta. And then for C tier, I would just drop these champions if you're playing them right now for the start of Season 10. Gragas and Sej have just been nerfed way too much because of the pro scene throughout Season 9, so to start off Season 10, they're sitting in pretty bad spots. For Fiddlesticks, he's just so bad in the current jungle because if you fall behind on this champion, he's probably the most useless champion in the game if behind, or one of the most useless junglers in the game if behind. And if you're going up against a strong early game jungler, you really can't do anything to like skirmish against them in the early game. You can't really contest crabs, you can't contest dragons or look to solo out dragons in the early game. So I just think that Fiddlesticks is one of the weakest junglers right now in the current meta. So taking a look at the mid lane now, a lot of different champions in S tier, so I think there's a lot of really good mid lane champions you can play to climb with to start off Season 10. Diana's super good right now after her mini rework. She's been doing super good in solo queue, so if you can play a good Diana right now, you should be looking to pick her up for the start of Season 10. Fizz there, Talon, really good assassin champions you can play right now. The Rumble mid, always an underrated mid lane pick, one of the best champions in the game, but he's never played a ton, so you can use that to your advantage. I think like both Rumble and Nocturne right now, very underrated mid lane picks, and players just aren't going to know how to play against them, and you can look to get a ton of solo kills in the early game with these champions. Their mid games are very strong, so you can just take over games with these picks in the current meta. For Mr. -5 movement speed there, he's not going to be weaker in this patch. Look to pick him up, look to play him if you're a good Kassadin player. He's still extremely strong right now, even though he did get a nerf in quotation marks to start off Season 10. For Katarina there, great in the meta because she's a really good skirmishing mid lane champion, really good roaming mid lane champion, so she's pretty much perfect for how the meta is set up here to start Season 10. Mordekaiser is just an OP pick for like top lane and mid lane right now, so if you want to play him in mid lane, you can. He's just broken right now, so it doesn't really matter what role you play him in, he's gonna be a very strong pick. And then Ahri, always a very consistent mid lane pick. You can make her work in almost any matchup. She can be a pretty good blind pick for you for the majority of elos, so I think that if you're looking for a good champion to main who's always pretty consistent, who's always going to be a pretty strong mid lane pick, then look to pick up Ahri. And then for a couple of the A tier picks there, if you're looking for a good counter to a few of the assassins in the mid lane right now, like the Katarina, Zed, Talon, you can look to pick up the Malphite mid. Malphite mid does really well, especially for the lower elos, pretty underrated mid lane pick, so he can do well in certain situations. I'd probably have him like as more of a counter pick than a blind pick. Like obviously he does have his weaker matchups, which is why I wouldn't place him like an S tier or anything, but in certain matchups he can completely pop off and do a great job at countering some of the meta picks. A couple more notables here: Aurelion Sol, Cassiopeia, Tristana, all very good early game skirmishing mid lane champions, so I think they're great right now for the current meta if you know how to play them well. If you're looking for a good counter to Kassadin right now too, I think the Tristana mid is a really strong pick. Just like any AD champion obviously is going to do pretty good into the Kassadin, but by playing the ranged AD mid laner in Tristana and just having a ton of kill pressure in the early game, I think that's great into a pick like the Kassadin. So for the B tier champions there, I still think they're decent. You can make them work, like I've said before, like if you're a main or you're an OTP of the picks, but I just think there's better champions higher up on the tier list that can basically just do their jobs better. So for something like Xerath or Ziggs, if you want to play a poke mid lane champion right now, why pick them when you can just play something like Vel'Koz, who's a lot better at the moment? If you want to play like an AD mid lane champion who can like skirmish pretty well in the early game, why pick Yasuo when you can play something like Talon or Nocturne or Tristana? So not terrible picks, picks, but I just think there's better champions higher up on the tier list. And then for C tier, 3 of those champions are getting buffed to start season 10 here, so Sylas, Azir, and Corki, but the buffs look pretty minuscule for the most part. Like, I really don't think they're going to affect those champions too much. We'll have to see, like, as the patch does progress, if the champions do end up getting much stronger, but I really don't expect it, so that's why I do still have them down in C tier here. I think like the Sylas changes could be the more interesting ones, like the Azir and Corki ones. They don't seem very big at all, but the Sylas changes could bump him up into like B tier or something, but I still think he's going to be a relatively weak pick to start off season 10. So moving down to the bot lane now for AD carry, S tier champions are going to consist of Misfortune, Aphelios, Caitlyn, Jhin, Jinx, and Heimerdinger. So Misfortune, really good early game champion right now, pretty good skirmish in the early game, does have the potential to just take over lanes in a lot of matchups. So I just think because the champion is so easy to execute, like right now, you go for a full AD build on her of Essence Reaver into Infinity Edge, and then you can go for like Bloodthirster or Stormrazor, and with that setup, you just have so much AD, your ultimate hurts for a ton, you don't need to know how to kite with this champion at all in order to make her work because she just does so much upfront damage. I think Aphelios is arguably the strongest AD carry in the game if you know how to play him well. If you have a decent grasp on this champion, if you played him for a little while, then I do think he is a great pick right now in the current meta. For Caitlyn, for Jhin, both champions benefited a ton from the Stormrazor changes to start season 10, so really good picks right now. That item is just so good on them. These picks can also go for like the Caitlyn, the Jhin, and along with the Jinx there, can go for this like 100% crit setup to where you go for Infinity Edge, Berserker Greaves, and then you grab 3 Cloaks of Agility and you just grab a ton of crit. You grab 100% crit early on, so you're just going to be dealing a ton of DPS in mid-game team fights. And then for A tier, I do think there's a lot of pretty strong AD carries at the moment, so that's why there's a lot of picks in both the S tier and in the A tier at the moment. I think you can succeed on a ton of picks right now down in the bot lane, so if you do want to play more so of an early game focused bot lane champion, then picking up the Lucian, the Ashe, the Draven, really good picks right now for the meta. More of a niche pick down in the bot lane right now, the Cassiopeia along with the Veigar, like they can have very strong laning phases. You can really surprise the opponent as to how good of an all-in they can have at level 6. Cassiopeia can deal a ton of damage first couple levels once she hits level 2, and if you pair them up with a good aggressive CC support, you can take over lanes on those 2 picks. For the B tier champions there, for Sivir and Xayah, they have received a lot more nerfs than the other AD carries as of recent. They used to be some of the top tier AD carries a couple patches ago, but because of the nerfs they did receive, they've kind of dropped down a little bit over the past couple patches here, and they're no longer super good picks. Like, I still think they're decent, which is why they're in the B tier, but I wouldn't really be prioritizing them over a champion in the S tier or in the A tier. And then for the C tier AD carries, these are basically going to be the grief AD carries to start off season 10. So if you're picking these in your solo queue games, like unless you're just either a challenger level player or you're just insane on these picks, they're just not going to be worth picking over a champion higher up on the list. Ezreal hasn't really been a champion ever since the Kleptomancy removal. That rune was just way too good on him, so that being removed has put him in a pretty bad spot. The new Conquer started off all right on him, but that even got nerfed, which dropped him down even more. So just overall, please stay away from Ezreal. Don't play him in my games to start off season 10. For Kalista, she's just been such a bad pick for such a long time now. She's been such a problem, like balancing for pro play and for solo queues, so she's just never really been in the greatest spot, and that's the same thing to start off season 10. Just don't pick up Kalista if you do want to climb. And then for support, to round out the video here, a lot of different champions in the S tier at the moment. So support, I think, is a very strong role to start off season 10. I'd say that it's probably like the 3rd strongest role in the game. I think that mid and jungle are always going to be like 2 of the best roles, but I think support is even stronger than like AD carry at the moment. You can definitely dictate lanes a lot better like as a support champion than an AD carry champion. If you can play like a good Nautilus right now, a good Leona, a Blitzcrank, even like Bard, there's just a lot of really good aggressive support champions that you can play, and if you can play them to their potential, you can completely take over lanes on the picks. Soraka's gotten a lot stronger to start off season 10 with the Ocean Dragon changes. Having that regen when you're in combat is so good for Soraka because it just allows her to stay in combat there, healing her teammates, and she's going to be healing up herself from that Ocean Dragon at the same time, so really nice change for her. Also, the new Shirelias is a really underrated item, really good on Soraka as a 3rd item, really good on like most supports as a 3rd item right now. It just gives your team nice peeling potential, nice engage potential once you do pick that item up in the mid to late game. So for the A tier supports, there are things like Vel'Koz, the Zyra, the Swain, the Brand. I think really good champions to carry within solo queue. The only problem with them is that if you do get up against like a very strong early game bot lane, if you're going up against something like a Nautilus, a Leona, and their AD carries are like Lucian, Tristana, or they're playing like Caitlyn, Jhin, then you do have the potential to just completely flop lane. Like if you end up getting engaged on super early on, then you can just be completely useless for the rest of the game. So if you can play the picks well, if you know your matchups, then I think they're very strong and they're some of the best carry picks you can play for 10.1. One pick that does get a lot stronger for season 10 is the Braum pick as well. He does have very good early game skirmish, so that's great for the current meta. He also did get buffed a couple patches ago, so that helped him out a ton as well. And he does do pretty good into the S tier support pick, so he's good into the Nautilus, the Leona, the Blitzcrank, like pretty much any engaged support Braum can do very well into. So if you've mained him in the past, if you've been thinking about picking him up for season 10, I do think now is a pretty good time to pick the champion back up. For the B tier supports there, if you want to play a good poke support to start off season 10, then why play Lux or Xerath when you can just play something like Vel'Koz or Zyra or Brand, who can be a lot easier to execute, and they also do have much better skirmishes in the early game too, which make them better for the meta. If you want to play a good engaged support champion too, then the Pyke and the Alistar are just completely outclassed right now by things like the Nautilus, the Leona, the Rakan, the Blitzcrank, so I would just be staying away from those supports as well to start off season 10. And then for the support C tier, these are very similar to the AD carry C tier, and they're just like grief champions right now. Like if you care about elo to start season 10, if you care about winning games, then please don't pick these champions. They've been pretty bad for quite some time now. I could even have them down in like D tier or an F tier. That's how bad of picks they are. The only time like I would ever pick Yuumi is if you're like playing like with a duo down in the bot lane, but even then, if you can play with an S tier or an A tier support and you can duo with your AD carry, it's gonna be way more useful pretty much all the time. So these picks just really lack any carry potential down in the support role. They're champions that are more so coin flip, like you rely a lot more on your team when playing these champions compared to pretty much every other support pick in the game, so they're just not worth picking up in my opinion. Alright, so that is going to round out the video, guys. Hopefully you did enjoy this. Hopefully it does give you a pretty good idea of what is strong here to start off season 10 and what you can consider picking up to start off your season 10 climb. So with that being said, guys, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.